It is a great pleasure, and I'm particularly proud to introduce our next speakers who will make a joint presentation. Elizabeth George and Natalie Roberts are completing their undergraduate degrees at Canisius College, right here in the Animal Behavior, Ecology, and Conservation program. Through the Canisius Ambassadors for Conservation program, they've traveled to Manitoba, Tanzania, Indonesia, British Columbia, and Costa Rica. They hope that the web pages, the booklets, and films that they've developed as part of their program can serve as examples of how personal experiences via ecotourism can be used to affect positive change in the world. Please join me in welcoming Natalie Roberts and Elizabeth George.
Thank you, Dr. Noonan. It is a pleasure to participate in this symposium. This talk will describe one particular program that we conduct here at Canisius College. One thing that is often said is that ecotourists come back from their experiences with an enhanced sensitivity to issues related to wildlife and ecology, and that even without explicitly thinking about it, they go on to serve as ambassadors for conservation because the stories they tell and the photos they show often inspire their friends and family to similarly develop a heightened appreciation of nature. We wonder if this is true. We certainly hope that it is, and we definitely think that it would be a worthwhile topic of study. In any event, our talk today is about a university program right here at Canisius College that formalizes this relationship and makes the equation very explicit. It is a program founded and directed by our symposium host, Dr. Michael Noonan, who of course is sitting right over here. So in a way, this could or should be him making this presentation. However, as he said, this program is entirely student-focused, and we are very proud to be a part of it and to represent it in this way. The method is to develop a team of Canisius College students into effective advocates for wildlife, and it starts each year when signs like this appear on campus recruiting applicants. And that leads to a rather selective process in which Canisius College students have to actually audition for positions in the program based on their ability to communicate ecological issues to others, especially children. The selected team then travels with Dr. Noonan to distant locales for firsthand observations of wildlife and the challenges they face. Those CSC students then return not only with a heightened appreciation of nature, but also with a heightened understanding of conservation issues and an emotional connection to a particular ecosystem or species. Then, as ambassadors, the CAC students share that newfound passion with others, utilizing 7 different pathways that reach out either to school children or to the general public. So in this way, ecotourism is at the heart of the CAC program, and it is something that we think a lot about as we engage in this enterprise. We have many policies in place, and when we are out in the field, Dr. Noonan is always encouraging us to think critically about what we are doing, how we are gaining our experiences, and whether the equations are in balance. For one thing, we endorse the motto, as Brian mentioned earlier, take only photographs, leave only footprints. This statement embodies the ideal of making as little impact as possible on the natural state of the places we visit. It simply means to leave things as they are. Unless you are cleaning up someone else's litter, it is best to leave items such as bones, scat, and skulls where you found them. Every part of nature plays a vital role in the survival of all the creatures that inhabit it. It implies that you should clean up after yourself. Leaving things like garbage, food, and ashes can drastically affect an environment and the animals who inhabit it. CAC trips have a strict policy of no color polluting, which means that everyone involved is required to wear natural muted colors so that even visually our presence is minimized. As CACs, we are taught when watching a wild animal to try not to change its behavior, to be respectful, and treat every experience as if we are entering another's home. We carefully watch for any behaviors that may indicate stress, or that the animal may want to move in a certain direction, and then adjust our position accordingly, by either moving gradually to the side so that the animal may pass, or by moving farther away. Dr. Noonan also instructs us to let nature take its course. So as much as we may sometimes want to help an animal that appears to be in need, we do not interfere and disrupt the balance of nature. and we certainly do not feed wild animals since it can change their natural behaviors. At the end of every day, we discuss, did we move that animal? Were we too close? If so, how can we change our behavior in the future so that we do not disturb these animals? When traveling, we also try to spend our time and money where it's deserved and support local communities. While on CAC trips, we are encouraged to think critically about the real effect of our travel. Nearly all forms of travel can be detrimental to the environment. And so when we travel, we do our best to honestly assess the impact of our carbon emissions, our garbage stream, etc. Should we sacrifice our adventures because of these impacts? Or without visitors, will areas of our environment be deemed unimportant and be destroyed from lack of visitor income? We recognize these as questions that warrant critical reflection and empirical research. And now let me turn the mic over to my classmate, Elizabeth, who will give you some further examples.
Hello, everyone. I, too, am very proud to be representing the CAC program in this way. I have been lucky enough to have participated in a number of CAC projects. In one setting, after having gained experience in the field, I helped deliver lessons on bird migration to local school children. In another project, I had the privilege of observing wild chimpanzees in Gombe National Park in Tanzania, under the tutelage of Bernard Jacobi, whom everyone heard speak earlier today. That experience led to the development of a teacher's manual that focused on chimpanzee biology and conservation. In addition, I contributed to a CAC film production about forests of the world. And this film is now bringing lessons about their ecology and wonder to thousands of viewers. Most recently through the CAC program, I studied the topic of island biogeography in Hawaii. And while this is a location that typically draws tourists for its beaches, hotels, and surfing spots, it is also a place filled with wonderful wildlife, thus making it an ideal spot for ecotourism as well. This was the first branch of CAC in which we tested the effectiveness of using Facebook as our primary outlet. And while it's still a work in progress, the reach is already in the thousands, already making this a modest success in terms of numbers. But today, I especially want to share some observations we made on a CAC project that focused in part on the orangutans of Indonesia. In the first place, we came away extremely impressed with the life's work of Birute Galdikas, the huge influence she has had on shifting local attitudes towards conservation, and the sheer numbers of animals that have been saved and reintroduced in the wild. And we are very impressed with the ways in which ecotourism was interwoven in this process. For the most part, the parks have large inner cores that are tourist-free, surrounded by peripheries in which wildlife watching by the tourists is limited to controlled conditions and even facilitated. It is facilitated primarily by feeding stations, an approach not unique to this particular species or setting, as we've been discussing so far today, and one which itself is probably deserving of critical analysis. In any event, here's what it looked like with the orangs in Indonesia. Once per day, the park workers would repeatedly call out into the forest and then would set fruit out on platforms like these. Any wild orangs, especially ones recently rehabilitated and released, would then have the option of slowly swinging over through the treetop to take advantage of the supplemental food. And at the same time, our movements as tourists were being coordinated by our boat drivers and tour guides so that we could be present to observe these animals if they came. We were held in designated viewing areas set back from the platforms at a distance of about 25 meters. So these photos can give you kind of a better sense of the scene. As you can see, there were sometimes more than one animal at the station at the same time, which could be described as a bit unnatural for this species, since they're typically observed as solitary when in the forest. And now let me relate to you something very interesting that happened while we were there. In fact, I should warn you, you may find it somewhat disturbing. This large male came down to the feeding station and then waited, seemingly asleep, in the underbrush near the platform. Then suddenly, this happened. So a female with a juvenile approached the platform, and the male sprung to life and pursued her up these trees. And proceeded to what we would consider rape her. Certainly had the appearance of forced copulation as she was attempting to get away and apparently trying to keep her baby out of harm's way. It was honestly heart-wrenching and difficult to watch. And an important point to emphasize here is that this was not an unusual event. All of the guides were consistent in telling us that these kind of episodes of ambush sex tended to take place about once per week at these feeding stations. So obviously, this gave us a lot to think about. For one thing, despite genuine praise for the approach overall, we did feel that too much of the procedure was driven by the tourism needs. We felt pretty strongly, for example, that we were too close, that by this process, the animals were repeatedly obliged to approach humans quite closely in order to get food. And this was not an ideal procedure designed to foster independence in the process of rehabilitation. For another thing, we felt that the use of single feeding stations was not optimal. It was good for us as the tourists, concentrating all the animals in one, easy to see place. But we felt strongly that if there had just been 3 or 4 similar platforms spread out over a few acres, then 1, the animals could more easily choose to keep their natural distance, and 2, the females could watch out for and more easily avoid the large territorial males. So we came away from this experience as even more passionate advocates for wildlife, and within an overall strong enthusiasm for educational travel like this, a critical eye towards what is working well and what isn't working at the detail level. And through our website and educational booklet, the Feed Forward products from this project, we have advocated a continued refinement of this process. Back to Natalie.
My own experiences have been similar. Through CAC, I have traveled to Rocky Mountain National Park in the US to study elk, with Elizabeth to Gombe Stream in Tanzania to study chimpanzees, and to Churchill, Manitoba in Canada to shoot video of beluga whales for our most recent CAC film project. My experiences with CAC have been some of the most memorable of my life. And as I mentioned earlier, the trip to Churchill was by far the best ecotourism experience I have ever had. And this was because the wildlife actually came to us. One could infer that the beluga's curious and playful nature led them to come and investigate novel stimuli, that novel stimuli being us. Whether we were snorkeling, kayaking, or even on a larger boat, the belugas would swim over to us, and before we knew it, we were surrounded by whales, almost as if we were one of the pod. It was a truly incredible experience. As an animal behavior major, we are often asked, what's your favorite species? Up until then, I had always struggled with that question. It was so hard for me to pick just one. But after this experience, I readily answer the beluga whale. Following my field experience, I then went on to deliver a pro-conservation program at Marineland right here in Niagara Falls. My time with this wonderful species, both in the wild and at Marineland, was connected by the CAC motto, "The stream begins with me." Our program was centered on the fact that all of the water of the world is connected, and anything we put down our drains can end up out in the ocean. I stressed the importance of keeping our oceans and waterways clean, so that we can keep all of the creatures that live in them, including belugas, happy and healthy. This message gained even greater importance for me when I spent time with belugas in the wild. This experience strengthened my emotional connection to them and my desire to protect them. And that's what CAC is all about, connections. Understanding the natural connections of the world and highlighting the connections we humans have with nature. Feeling emotionally connected, whether it be with a species or a place, and then connecting with others, sharing what you have learned and what you love. In this way, it really is a feed-forward mechanism. In another example, this feed-forward mechanism occurs in our program at the Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge that Elizabeth briefly mentioned. In this branch of our program, the CACs travel to observe species of birds along their migratory routes. These species are thus connected both to distant locales and to our own local environment through their migration patterns. The CAC students then return and lead middle school students on day-long educational programs at our local wildlife refuge. And here you can see some of the reactions to this program through letters written by young students. The CAC students get a priceless educational travel opportunity, and then they pay it forward by giving middle school classrooms a memorable outdoor learning experience. The CAC has also partnered with the Buffalo Zoo, another program that I have been fortunate to be a part of. There we conduct educational tours, provide content and context during animal demonstrations, and engage visitors in educational games. At other times, the CAC students go directly to the classrooms, where they talk to and interact with children. And the goal is always the same. As Dr. Noonan puts it, it is to inspire the next generation of citizens to be good stewards of the earth. In addition to these programs, CAC maintains a very substantial web presence, which can be found at conservenature.org. It provides educational videos, games, and written content, both on individual species and on ecosystems. The CAC program has completed a number of film productions, including Elephas Maximus, The Biology and Conservation of the Asian Elephant, which documents elephants both in captivity and in Sri Lanka, and a video chronicling the world's forests entitled Forest Secrets, Science and Soul, starring Elizabeth as the narrator. Okay, to bring this back home, the CAC program is offered as an example by which the benefits of ecotourism can extend beyond the few individuals who actually travel, an often uncounted benefit of the ecotourism paradigm. We believe that ecotourism does have the ability to inspire a love of wildlife in those who directly experience it. Perhaps even more importantly, we feel the benefits can extend beyond those individuals who actually travel. Our program is one in which a feed-forward process is formally shared in educational settings. We invite all of you to consider other less formal feed-forward mechanisms involving ecotourism that can advance the benefit side of the ecotourism equation. Sorry, back up. In other words, instances as suggested here, in which we encounter nature, followed by exchanges back home, has the effect of enhancing our overall stewardship of nature. Most significantly, however, we also believe that this equation should be examined critically and studied further to ensure that it really is a verifiable benefit for the wildlife and people involved. That is why members of the CAC program, like us, are so enthusiastic about this symposium and the critical analysis that it is bringing to this topic. Thank you.